Twirl, twirl. Good boy. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're gonna be making a duffel handbag. The dimensions are 17 by 10 with a 10-inch diameter. This is a super simple project for all sewing levels. And the pattern is super simple to use. All you have to do is print it out, tape it together, cut it out, and you're ready to go. And other than that, let's get started. Getting started with supplies, you'll need 2 yards of canvas, denim, or heavyweight twill for the outer layer, 2 yards of lighter weight fabric for the lining, and if you are using a lighter weight fabric for the outer layer, you can also use that for the lining. 2 20 by 4 inch strips of vinyl or leather for the straps. We're going to be using both in this video. I'm going to combine them to make one strap. Leather is on the more expensive side, so vinyl is the cheaper solution. 1 22-inch zipper, it can be metal or plastic, and it can be longer than 22 inches because we're going to be snipping the end. And lastly, your pattern. The pattern is available at properfitclothing.com, and the link will be provided in the description below. Once you printed the pattern, it's best to cut the top edge and the side edge of all the pages. This will allow you to overlap the pattern from left to right in alphanumerical order. Once you have the pages all lined up, tape it together and cut it out on the outside of the black line. After cutting, you should end up with 2 zipper end panel pieces. This is going to be cut out of your outer layer. 2 main side pocket panels cut out of your outer layer. 2 bottom panels, 1 cut out of your outer layer and 1 out of your lining, and make sure to cut these on the fold. 4 side panels, 2 out of your outer layer and 2 out of your lining. 4 main panels, 2 out of your outer layer and 2 out of your lining. 2 strap panel A out of vinyl or leather, and make sure you cut it on the fold. And the same for strap panel B. And the reason they're 2 different sizes is because we're sewing them together and cutting the edges of the bigger one. And this is what the finished strap is going to look like, but we'll go more into the straps later. Before we start sewing, it's best to mark the guidelines on the main panel. This is going to help position the pocket and the straps. It's easiest done by marking the corners and then connecting the points with the ruler. And do the same thing for both outer main panels. Starting with construction, grab your main side pocket panels. We're going to hem the top of the pocket by folding at the top guide marks. And this is best done one at a time. Fold the first one, press it, fold the second one, and press it. From here, you can add a stitch at the top if you would like, or you can go on to the next step. And remember to do this for both of the pocket panels. Grab your pocket panels and your main panel. Place your pocket panel evenly within your guides on your main panel. The edges of the pocket panel should line up within the middle of the strap guides, and go ahead and sew that on as close as you can to the outside edge. Don't worry about the raw edges showing because the strap is going to cover those raw edges, and go ahead and repeat this process for the other main panel. Grab your main panel lining, and your zipper. Place the zipper on the top edge of the outer layer with the right sides together. It's best to center the zipper because we're going to end up clipping the ends after it's all sewn together. Place the lining layer on top, sandwiching the zipper in between both layers. Pin all the layers together, and we're going to sew along that top edge. And we're going to use a zipper presser foot. This is going to help us sew right up against that zipper, but if you don't have one, it's totally fine. You can just use a regular presser foot. And do your best to keep all the layers even and centered as you sew. And when you finish up, we're going to flip the wrong sides together, lining up the outer and lining layer. And what we're going to do is add a top stitch to that inside seam. We're going to be using a presser foot that has an edge guide on it. This will allow you to get super straight top stitches and make your project look more professional overall. And what you do is just keep that guide up against the edge as you're sewing, and it will keep it even along that entire seam. And again, you can do this without the presser foot guide. It's just a helpful tip to get straight top stitches. Also, matching the thread to the outer layer really helps too. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other side. Line up the lining layer on the wrong side of the zipper and the outer layer on the right side of the zipper. Make sure the new panels line up with the panels you already have sewn on. Go ahead and pin it at the top and sew along that edge. When you finish that stitch, flip the wrong sides together and add your top stitch. Flip the panels open and just do a quick check to make sure that everything is lined up evenly, and if it is, you're good to go to the next step. Grab your zipper end panels. Using the guides from the pattern, we're going to roll those edges over, and we're going to start with the side edges. Press the edges so they stay down, and we're going to do the same thing for the top and bottom edge. Roll them over once and press them down. From here, we're going to fold it in half and press it one more time. Make sure the sides line up when you fold it in half, and what we're going to do is place that on the zipper ends. The folded side will point towards the zipper, and the opposite side will hang off the edge about 1/4 inch. Pin it down and sew around the outside and bottom edges. And when you're going over the zipper, depending on what type of zipper you're using, just go slow and kind of hand crank it over the zipper, and it shouldn't break your needle. This is going to add a nice little covering for that zipper to tuck into. And if you want to, you can also use other materials like webbing or leather to give it a different look. Grab your other zipper end panel, and we're going to do the same thing for the other side, but make sure you move the needle to the inside of the bag. It's helpful to pin the zipper together before you pin on the panel. And from there, just go ahead and sew it on the same exact way. Moving on to the straps, grab both your strap A and strap B panels. And the idea behind this is to line up strap A inside of strap B and trim the edges, giving you a nice, flush, clean looking strap. I'm going to be using leather and vinyl just because leather is on the more expensive side, so I'm going to use vinyl for the inside. So place the wrong sides of your A and B panel together, lining up the A panel in the center of the B panel. And since you don't want to pin these materials, it's best to use a spray adhesive or any sort of temporary adhesive to secure these panels together for sewing. And once you have your panels lined up and secured together, go ahead and sew all the way around the outside edge. This is another situation the edge guide comes in handy. It gives a nice presentable stitch along that entire handle. And if you are using leather, I recommend using a leather needle. It'll keep you from breaking needles and puncturing your leather too bad. After you're done stitching, grab your scissors or your rotary blade and remove the excess material from panel B. Trim right up to the edge of panel A, giving you a perfectly clean, flush edge. And repeat this process for the other strap. Take your freshly made straps and we're going to add them to the main panel. Using the chalked out guides, we're going to line the strap up in the middle, covering the edge of the pocket. Let the bottoms hang out 1/4 inch, and the top of the guide is where you're going to end the stitch. And again, I recommend using an adhesive to secure that strap down as you're sewing. Make sure you move the lining to the back because we're only stitching the strap to the outer layer. Since we're only doing one strap at a time, you can lay it flat and sew along the outside edge from the bottom to the top. When you get to the top, stop, turn 90 degrees, sew along the top, stop, turn 90 degrees again, and sew all the way back down the edge. And you can go back and forth a few times at the top to add extra strength to the edge. That portion of the strap will take the most stress, so it's best to go back up, go about 1 inch down from the top, and stitch back and forth a few times to really lock that strap down. And we're going to do the same thing for the other side, but if you want your handles bigger, you just have to make your straps longer, and as you can see, the handle gets bigger and smaller based on the length of the strap. Just like the other strap, sew from the bottom to the top and back down to the bottom. And the biggest thing is to make sure that both of the bottoms are lined up evenly. When they're lined up evenly, the top of the handle is going to line up perfectly centered in the middle of the bag. And there you go, your first handle is on and secure, and we're going to go ahead and repeat this process for the other side. And it's going to be the same exact process, just do one handle at a time, making sure you're lining up the bottom of the strap and also the strap on the other side. Moving on to the bottom panel, we're going to start with the outer layer. Place the right side together on either edge, making sure you're not sewing the lining layer, and we're going to sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance along that edge. And at this point, you can start to see the shape of the bag come together. Just a few more steps and the bag will be done. Grab your scissors and we're going to cut the leather that's sticking out past the seam allowance. This is going to reduce some of that bulk along that seam and make for an easier top stitch. Fold the seam allowance towards the bottom panel and add a top stitch along that seam. Just take it slow over the leather or vinyl. You shouldn't have too much of an issue after reducing some of the bulk. Adding the top stitch will help neaten up that seam and also provide more strength. And it's best your top stitch is within 1/4 inch to the edge, securing down the seam allowance. Grab the opposite main outer layer panel and place the right sides together on the opposite edge of the bottom panel. When you have the bottom edges lined up, pin them together and sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance along that edge. And we're going to repeat the same process we just did. Trim the leather or vinyl, fold the seam allowance towards the bottom panel, and add your top stitch. Adding this top stitch can be a little bit tricky. You're going to have to move the fabric around because you've connected the loop, so you can't just sew straight through, or else you might sew some layers together that you don't want to. And at this point, it's best to just double check to make sure that the seams on the outer layer are all sewn securely, and you're ready to move on to the next step, which is the lining. Place the bottom lining panel with right sides together on the main lining panel, and sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we're doing the same process we did for the outer layer, so flip it back around to the other side, and sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we're not going to add the top stitching for the lining panel, but if it is something you want to do, you totally can. It won't mess up any of the measurements. And as you can see, it turns out very similar to the outer layer. What we're going to do next is fold the lining layer to the inside of the outer layer, and this is done from the right or left opening. Flatten everything out, and it's best to line up the bottom outer layer and lining seams. Grab your side panels and make sure you have the centers marked on both top and bottom, and what we're going to do is place the wrong side of the lining and the outer layer together, and we're going to place it up against the sides with the right sides together. Pin it all the way around, and it's easiest to line up the center of the bottom and the center of the top, and once you have it lined up, sew at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around the outside edge. And this step may seem more complicated than it actually is, but all you're doing is literally just sewing the side panels onto the main panel. And this is another step you really want to take your time and go slow, because you want to keep those side panels centered with the main bag so it comes out perfectly square and sits correctly. Go slow over the zipper, and once you see where you started the stitch, line it up exactly with the start stitch and do a nice tack stitch to end it off. And once you completed the stitch, you can finally snip off the excess zipper and repeat this process for the other side panel. Next, I'm going to show you a few ways to clean up that raw edge on the inside. First technique is using pre-made bias tape. This is the most common way of cleaning up that raw edge. Most craft stores carry this, and it comes in a bunch of different colors. The way you install it is simply by sandwiching your edge on the inside of that bias tape and stitching directly on the bias tape, securing all those layers together. And you're going to want to do this in one complete piece all the way around the outside edge of your bag. The next technique is using a bias tape making kit. This allows you to make your own bias tape to match your bag. It comes with a bunch of different sizes of bias tape feeders, and also comes with a presser foot that helps attach the bias tape to the bag. Cut the bias tape to match the size folder you're using and press it as it comes out the other end. And this will give you the same result as the pre-made bias tape. The only difference is you get to choose the material so you can actually match it, and you can also choose the width. From here, you install it the same way as the pre-made bias tape. Or you can feed it through the presser foot and let the presser foot do the work. And the last technique, and the one I use the most, is using a double fold bias tape binder. It attaches to your sewing machine and does everything in one step, so all you have to do is feed in your bias tape and stitch. It's easiest to find these for industrial sewing machines, but they do sell them for domestic machines. I've even taped them onto household machines before. It does totally work, so you don't have to feel limited by your sewing machine. But if you're planning on making a lot of these bags, it is best to go the industrial sewing machine route. They can withstand a lot more stress and they're lower maintenance. But if you're only making a few things, a domestic machine will get the job done. And we're going to go ahead and repeat this process on the other side panel and flip the right side out. When you have the right side totally flipped out, your bag is done. Give it a quick look around, make sure all the layers are sewn shut, and after that, you're ready to use it. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to keep the videos coming at you with random patterns and designs I come up with. If you ever think of something you want made, definitely send it my way in a comment or on my website. I'll for sure check it out and see what I can do. But other than that, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.